Hello, Matt. Thank you for joining me here today. I'm here with CEO and co-founder of Clearcogs, Matt Wampler. To get started, you just want to describe a little bit about your background and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, first off, Leah, thank you so much for having me, and we really appreciate everything you guys are doing over at the Green Business Bureau. But yeah, no, I'm happy to talk a little bit about my background and what we're doing over at ClearCogs. So I actually came up through the restaurant industry. I bought my first franchised restaurant right out of college. Some guy had run it into the ground and needed to get out of the lease, and so I was the 21-year-old patsy that stepped in and assumed all the liabilities, and the rest was kind of history. And it was only later on in life that I found programming and data science, and really was blown away with just what technology could do for small businesses. And with that, we set out and slowly ended up becoming ClearCogs, where we leverage data to help restaurants make better decisions and operate their business more profitably.
Cool. I mean, it sounds like you have a background in restaurants and it makes sense how you ended up where you are today. So when you help restaurants optimize their business and their operations, what does that usually look like? Can you give an example?
Yeah, the best way we put it is this. If I gave you a crystal ball, you could see the future. What would you use to answer? What is it that you need to know? And because at the end of the day, that's really what we do at ClearCogs is we're a predictive analytics company, bringing all of this data, but how do we synthesize it down to
Hmm.
the decisions you make every day? So, the analogy I always use is the bagel maker, right? Like I show up to my bagel place in the morning and I have to decide, okay, how many bagels do I want to prep today? And how many need to be everything and how many need to be plain? And I think one of the surprising things out there is a lot of times they're just guessing, right? Or they have kind of set benchmarks. And oh, by the way, we ran out of everything bagels yesterday, so I'm going to bake more today.
Hmm.
And you know, it's it's the way it's always been done, and it's not a very efficient way. And so it's how can we bring those tools into them so that they can make that decision better, or provide the answer to that question.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're really disrupting the way that things have always been, where it's been a lot of guesswork and a lot of just, we normally sell this many, so let's maybe make this money. And you're putting some numbers and some predictions to it. So you're not left with like zero everything bagels and you usually sell a lot of everything bagels. Is that kind of what it looks like?
Yeah, I kind of equate it to the weather back in like the 70s or 80s where, you'd read the newspaper and they'd be like, oh, it's going to be sunny out today. And you walk outside and it's raining. Like that's where like predictive analytics, at least for restaurants, has always
Hmm.
been, where like there's always been something in your back of the house software that might tell you something, but it was always wrong, right? But
Yeah.
luckily, the Amazons, Walmarts of the world, and open AIs have really, really advanced machine learning and AI to the point where like companies like us can leverage these tools to really actually answer on a granular level what their needs are.
Yeah, that sounds important. So, in your industry is like in restaurants, food waste is largely associated with your industry. So, what ways would you say that your tool or your software helps prevent some food waste?
Yeah, Leah, that's a really good question. So the original way that we got into this was answering a simple question. In a bunch of these sandwich operations, they had a question they had to answer every day, and that was a couple hours prior to close, do I need to bake more bread or do I have enough?
Hmm.
And they, by nature, are reactive, so they're kind of playing it by feel, which is inefficient. It's actually really stressful. As a result, they were wasting a lot of bread. By being able to just answer the question for this restaurant at this time, you need to have 18 sticks of bread. We were able to reduce their bread waste by 54%. And I think it's a good example of how it's meeting the customer where they are. If you're able to answer that question, you're able to massively reduce their waste.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds really effective. I mean, to go from just kind of maybe in the instance of a sandwich shop, having some 16-year-olds closing at the end of the night, wondering how much more they need to make, and then putting some actual science behind it, I can see it helping out with a lot of things.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, think about it. Like you're the 16, 18-year-old assistant manager, you're running the shift, right? You've got two options. One is I bake extra bread, I throw it away. It's probably not the end of the world. Or, I run out and I've got angry customers and I have to shut off my online ordering and the owner's calling me angrily, like, of course they're going to overbake, right? Like, and being able to just step in and say, like, these are all cold hard numbers and like the analysis has been done and you're on average going to run out less often. But every now and then you may run out, and it's not your fault because you're following the system.
Yeah. Something that comes up for me is you're talking about looking at, making predictions. Do you want to walk me through how you do that? Does that involve a lot of data input, or what's that process like?
Yeah, look, the hardest thing restaurants ever deal with when it comes to technology is implementation. And it's not even just technology, everything in their operation. Implementation is number one. So we built a system that is incredibly easy to implement. There are no scales, there's no cameras, there's no manual entry. We tap into their POS data, we pull it up into the cloud, it goes through our machine learning algorithms, it goes through our optimizations, it looks at all of the individual ingredients and components of your restaurant, and then every day, just like a great manager, reviews all of the data, retrains itself, and comes up with your ideal numbers for the next day.
Hmm. Cool. I mean, that
Yeah.
that that sounds like it would be super helpful. So, does that mean that if somebody signs up for your tool, does a representative from your company help out with the restaurant inputting their data, or what sort of process is that?
Yeah, it's about a half hour setup, right? So like we bring in all their data, we get it, there's a couple of verifications, and then we get on a call with them and say, like, what do you need to know, right?
Mhm.
Like, what would make an impact in your business? And most of them know, right? It's
Yeah.
usually, protein prep and bread and, things like that. But, we'll sit down and say, here's how the system, here's how you use it, and get them all set up. And then after that, they can get on and edit things if they want, but they're kind of onboarded. They're receiving, we support our restaurants via email, so they get a morning briefing every day with all of the numbers they need to operate more efficiently.
That's great. What kind of results, or I don't know if you have any like numbers or star restaurants, what kind of results have you seen with this?
Yeah, it's all over the board is the answer. It's not simple just because
Yeah.
restaurants aren't simple and every
Yeah.
restaurant's different, everyone's unique. But statistically, we see ability to reduce food waste by up to, or at least the food waste as a result of over prep by up to
Mm.
85%. I can't help the person that throws away their food and doesn't eat it all, but on the prep side, by 85%. Now, anybody that's in a restaurant will tell you that sounds crazy, and it is. Like restaurants are incredibly difficult to actually like implement things in,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's over 50% reduction. So
Hmm.
we don't get to the full 85, but we see a 50% reduction along with reduced stockouts.
Oh, I mean, those numbers sound great, and I understand what you mean. You can't really control what they do with the food waste, but the fact that you even reduce it, that is significant because food waste is a huge problem, and in a industry that's inherently so closely tied to food waste, that I mean, just even bringing those numbers down is a huge first step.
Yeah, we look at even within the same brand, you'll see some restaurants that have 5 times the amount of food waste as other
Mm.
locations. So yeah, it kind of fluctuates all over the board. But I ultimately get back to, food waste is a really difficult, sticky problem. When you really like dig into it, a lot of it's driven by consumer behavior, which is really difficult to try
Yeah,
and change, right? It's a
for
noble
sure.
cause. We need to keep doing it, but like that's a long multi-decade process.
Mhm.
But when it comes to things like restaurants, right? We see 10% of the food going into a restaurant's back door, never even making it to the consumer.
Mhm.
And that's not something that restaurants want, right?
Yeah,
Like this is
save
ultimately
them money.
yeah, it's an efficiency problem, right?
Mhm.
And when you solve an efficiency problem, everyone wins. The problem is the efficiency problems are really really difficult to solve, and I'm glad we have a really smart team, and My co-founder is incredible, and they've been able to put together some amazing software.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're tackling food waste in some ways, but beyond food waste, are there any sustainability issues like recycling or reducing single use items that your tool helps attack?
Look, we do one thing
Yeah,
and we do it well. We're
yeah.
not we're not a giant back of the house software ERP system. Like, what we do is focus on forecasting and answering operational questions. Uh,
Hmm.
and in some ways, we're not even really a food waste company. We're an efficiency company.
Yeah.
It's how do we help your business run more efficiently? And food waste is a big part of that.
Yeah. It's more of a byproduct of your tool being used effectively as opposed to the main focus of the tool.
Yeah, and it's something that I find ironic, right? In some ways, I'm, the least likely person to be sitting on a podcast talking about, food waste and sustainability because I'm kind of more of a restaurant guy that
Hmm.
fell into this. And I think the lesson to be learned there is it's about meeting the customer where they are and empathizing with their situation and finding real practical solutions that actually are implementable, because that's how real change occurs.
For sure. I mean, the name of this podcast is Approachable Sustainability. Like, the whole point is to show that sustainability doesn't necessarily mean overhauling the way that you do everything. I mean, in some ways, we probably should, but right now we're trying to show that sustainability is approachable and it's these small steps. So, if you use your tool and you become more efficient, then you're reducing food waste and, maybe you're doing other things like with scheduling, preventing cars because people don't have to be confused about when they're supposed to be in the office and things like that. Or if you have electronic pay stubs, then you don't have to worry about, printing all of those out and things like that. But then also, that's kind of where Green Business Bureau comes in because we have more of the in depth sustainability initiatives and we're building out our restaurant initiatives so that, if you're looking for a tool to not only just improve your efficiency, but also improve kind of the day to day things that you're doing, then maybe you would go towards that. Whereas if you're looking for just your efficiency and the way that you operate, you would go more towards Clearcogs.
So I think that you really touched on something, and that is, the Green Business Bureau and meeting people where they are. I
Hmm.
mean, what you guys do, you know, the access to information and tangible solutions, like that's the biggest gap, right? Because I do go back to people want to make the right choice.
Hmm.
They just don't know how to, where to find that information. And I think that you guys do such a great job bridging that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And I mean, that's the goal is anyone can sign up. So, like I mentioned, we're working on building out our restaurant initiatives. And so any restaurant owner, even restaurant worker that's passionate about sustainability, they can sign up and they have all of these initiatives. And it's not prescriptive. You don't have to do a specific set of initiatives, but you pick which ones work for you. And we give you the information so then you can kind of figure out, let's plan. And we have over 200 initiatives in our whole library. And you can plan what works for you based on your priorities. And it feels a lot more, again, back to the approachable sustainability idea. It feels more approachable because it's not like, okay, you have to do these 10 things to get certified. And it's just not feasible for a small restaurant or a small company. We allow it to work for you.
Yeah, and your endeavor, initiative into the restaurants, I think it's a really interesting space to be
Mm.
bringing that information in because and this may be a biased perspective and maybe a little cynical, but I tend to believe that in the restaurant world, a lot of times the association with sustainability is paper straws. They cost 4 times as much. My
Yeah.
customers hate them, but like I'm using paper straws and therefore I'm a sustainable restaurant,
Yeah.
right? And like that's because that's the information that they hear.
Hmm.
And there are so many other ways that they can be sustainable and make a huge impact in the environment. And also, again, I go back to and operate more efficiently, right? Like,
Hmm.
but the lack of awareness out there, these aren't conversations people are having. Most restaurants live within their four walls. they're trying to
Mhm.
pay the bills, they're trying to pay rent, they're trying to keep afloat. I mean, it has been a really difficult few years for them. And like, they don't have the bandwidth to go out and find these solutions. And so bridging that gap is now as important as it's ever been.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your point about the paper straws, that's like, so in sustainability, that's an idea called tokenism, where, everybody says, save the turtles. This is the solution to solve climate change or pollution. It almost becomes that. It's like the token solution where it distracts from other more important things. I mean, it's important to not use plastic straws, but it's part of a bigger issue of reducing your single use plastic consumption in general and doing other initiatives to be more sustainable, not littering. It's not about that one thing. And a lot of people get that confused.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think if you went and did a poll of Americans, certainly restaurant owners, and said, like, which causes more greenhouse gases, the airline industry or food waste in this country?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, yeah, airline industry, right? It's like,
Yeah.
no, it's actually food waste. And then, like, I was speaking with somebody far smarter than I am on this topic this morning. And it was like, and by the way, the greenhouse gas emissions, it's methane from food waste. And
Mm.
it's not carbon. And, trees sequester carbon and like actually remove it from the atmosphere. But when you waste food, it creates methane that doesn't, get sequestered. And like it's, 60 times worse for it than carbon. I'm sure I'm getting some statistics messed up there, but like, you know, it's a lack of knowledge. I mean, and I think that the fact that I'm having this conversation with you and I don't even know all of that knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Speaks to how much we as a society have to learn on this subject and a gap that we need to close.
Yeah, we absolutely do. But we're, taking those steps now. And I know that as a company, you're Green Business Bureau members. What are some things that you've done with your Green Business Bureau membership or some initiatives you've undertaken?
Yeah. Well, first off, we've been trying to do a lot of them. It's been probably a year. We've been on for a year,
Hmm.
and we did the original setup. I would say that one of the things the Green Business Bureau has really done for us has been outreach and connections and being able to speak with people like yourself, you know, reps that are out there talking with people, right? It's being part of a community that cares about this and supporting each other. And like, I think that's probably been the biggest thing that we've done
Yeah.
more than anything else.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and that's kind of the process. You've been a member for a year, and some people when they join, they ask us, one of the main questions is, okay, how long is this going to take? Or do I have to finish this by a certain time? And that's the point, is it's your sustainability journey. You sign up, you kind of figure out where you currently stand, and then you start to assess where you want to go. And that takes a lot of legwork, and it all depends on how much time you have. I mean, you don't have, at least to my understanding, most members of ours don't have like a chief sustainability officer that this is their main job. It's people with their, 9 to 5, 40, 50, 60 plus hour weeks that they're trying to do this because they're passionate about it and they care about it. So it's totally understandable that, you're using the platform, but you don't have to be at a certain point yet. It all depends on what you can devote to it.
It was a little comical for us, right? We are a small team, a dozen employees. We're all remote, right?
Yeah.
We really aren't doing any traveling. We don't have any real corporate events. Like we tend not to do shows. It was like kind of went through the checklist, like, oh, you know, we kind of check all of these boxes almost by the nature of the modern day economy and remote work, and
Yeah.
which was a nice surprise. Made it a little easier.
For sure. And I just actually added remote work initiatives a couple months ago, so you should check those.
Oh, I'll have to get back on and check it out.
Yeah, yeah. So then, because again, to reflect the way that the modern world works is so many companies are remote, and that doesn't mean you can't be sustainable though. Just because you don't have a fleet of vehicles, it doesn't mean that you're being sustainable by that you get those points for not
Yeah,
having.
yeah, no, you're right. Like by the nature of remote work, you're already like doing incredibly well, and like you beat out a lot of the other ones. And then it's like, but that doesn't mean there are not areas that you can improve. But yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, we don't have a chief sustainability officer. Again, like we live in the world of like, how do we make restaurants more efficient? And that's all we focus on. So to be able to have resources where you've done that work for us and we can
Mhm.
go and see that and like it's one less thing to think about. And yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So throughout your journey as a company, what are some ways that you've seen that you have a competitive advantage over other are there other competitors? What do you think gives you a competitive advantage compared to other people in this space?
There really aren't.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's implementation.
Mhm.
So how easy can I make it for you
Mhm.
to make the right choice, to make your business more efficient, right? It's a scale of how painful is it for me to go through this process to get to the other end. And we focus on reducing that pain. I think that's really what sets us apart. You don't need to go weigh anything. You don't need to track anything.
Mhm.
There's no monitoring, right? Like this is I hate to say set it and forget it, but it kind of is for at least a lot of our brands, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that commonly one of the worst and the most arduous things about signing up for something like this or like even a green platform or green certification is people don't want to take the time to input the data. That's usually like the longest and the hardest process where they're like, I don't want to do this. This takes so much time and to sit and think about that. So the fact that you work with them to do those things is great. And I mean, that's a great point that once they get that done, I mean, it's nice that they're able to, in some ways, just be like, "All right, we have it. We're good to go now." It takes a lot of planning and manpower out of the equation, it seems like.
You know, as a startup, we think a lot about product adoption. You've got your early adopters, and then, it slowly moves into your majority, and then, late adopters and all of that. And I think that, there's certainly a group that is very sustainably focused
Mhm,
and is, already on this stuff. But I think that, you go back to the tokenism side of things, right? Like the understanding that going on to a green business bureau and seeing these resources, you're not doing this as a way to, do the tokenism. You're doing this as a way to actually make your business better.
mhm.
These are things that may save you money, grow your customer base. And I think that we look at that product adoption like that's how you get the vast majority of businesses to start following these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that being said, you saying that you're a startup, what is your vision for the future? If you were to have an idea of where you want to go and where you want to see your product either evolve or just yeah, what is your vision for where you want to be in the future or where you think you can be?
When we look at the restaurant industry today, it's the restaurants that have mastered the cold business analytics of
Mm,
running a restaurant that win. The restaurants out there that create the magic, right? The amazing food, the experience, the things that we love, they're not necessarily the ones that are winning because they don't necessarily have the cold analytics of running the
mhm,
restaurant, the menu engineering, what's the formula for profitability down. Our vision for the future is simple. How do we leverage AI and create true AI back of house software, your own personal AI ops management system, fractional CFO, COO that can answer all of the cold analytics side of things so that restaurants can focus on the experience and making the magic happen because
mhm.
creating that magic is the hardest thing a restaurant ever does. And, the world that we want to live in, the one that we're building towards, is the one where it's the people that create the magic that are winning.
That's great. That's a great answer. I mean, hopefully the magic can happen and those people can win.
I've been doing this for like a couple years now. And, you
Mhm,
know, if you asked me a year ago, this would have seemed like the vision for the future that we're, they have Jetsons trying to get to, aspirational goal. And, in the last 12 months alone, everything from the chat GPT and BARD and all of these advancements, you know, it's never felt more practical, real, like these are now things that are on our product roadmap that are like scheduled to be, completed in the next, 12 months. So I've never been more optimistic about the future and the impact that technology is going to be playing for these businesses.
Yeah, I mean, technology is going some pretty crazy places right now, so I'm interested to see how that continues to evolve. So kind of like my last few questions here, I like to tie it back to the idea of approachable sustainability. So why do you think that sustainability is approachable?
It's a really good question. So when I have a conversation with a restaurant, that's not how I frame the question. So it's operational efficiency. How can we make your business run better and more profitably?
Mhm.
The byproduct of that is sustainability,
Yeah.
and so I think you make sustainability more approachable by speaking in the terms of your customer and the desired outcomes that they are wanting. And, you can call it operational efficiency, you can call it reducing food waste, you can call it sustainability, but at the end of the day, the net result is wasting less food, which is good for the business and good for the planet.
Yeah, you're all doing things towards that just push the needle a little further towards a common goal of being more efficient, using less resources, creating less waste. It doesn't necessarily matter exactly what you call it or how you get there. It just matters that you get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, based on that, and you saying that you want to see kind of the people that are creating the magic win and talking about your idea of what makes sustainability or efficiency or reducing food waste approachable, what would you say either that you've seen or just that you kind of hold on to that gives you hope for being able to achieve this?
It's the moment when you speak to a restaurant and they're like, you mean to tell me that like I don't need to get out my clipboard and write down all of these things anymore and like, I can save money and like not have to do more work. Like it's seeing it actually happen and like, it's almost like you're promising things that are too good to be true. And then when
Mm,
people actually see it happen, like there's this moment where they light up and they're like, oh my gosh. And like that gives me so much hope, right? Like every time that happens, it's just it's an honor to be part of it.
yeah. I mean, that sounds like a light bulb moment, and I can see that giving you a lot of hope. And I'm glad that you've seen that. And I hope that you continue to see a lot more of those in the future.
I'm sure we will.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Matt. I hope that you have a good day.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course.